Hey, everyone. So yeah, in this session, we're going to be talking a little bit about how we've been building Grafana dashboards for BI internally at Grafana Labs, and how it's become this visualization layer on top of our business data stack. But before we jump in, a little bit about ourselves.
Hello, I'm Sam Jewell. I'm a software engineer at Grafana Labs. I've been working on building support for a semantic layer into Grafana.
And I'm Chris. I was one of our first data hires here at Grafana, and I've led our central data and analytics team over the last two and a half years. So our agenda for today, we're going to start off with a bit about our why. So why do we build dashboards like this internally at Grafana, and why might you be interested in doing so as well? And then we'll spend the majority of our time going through a couple different demos, showing a couple dashboards around product analytics, probably one around sales analytics, as well as some of the cool new features we're seeing around Grafana Assistant, our Slack integration, and the awesome work that Sammy's been doing around the semantic layer. And then at the end, we'll open it up for any Q&A from all you.
So you've adopted Grafana, and you use it with your SREs, with your engineers, with your technical staff. And you use it to monitor, you use it, especially when things go wrong, it's there for you. And it's a flexible tool, so perhaps you could apply it in more context. What about in your business? Grafana can do incredible things. At Grafana Labs, literally every one of our departments use it, from product management to sales and marketing. And with a few other tools, we use it across the board. So we use it for product analytics to answer questions like, is my feature being used? We use it for project management to understand whether our engineers are becoming blocked. We use it for business intelligence, that's BI, to answer things like, which prospect should I be calling today? And of course, it's our observability tool as well. With all of the rest of our products, we answer many questions, starting with the simplest. Is my service up? So why do we use Grafana for everything? And might you be able to do the same? There are a few reasons that are unique to us, but there are many reasons that may apply to you and be relevant to your context. So the first reason that's unique to us, well, we build Grafana, of course, and so to us, using Grafana in such a diverse range of contexts is dogfooding, and it helps us to make Grafana that versatile tool that it is today. Another is we're heavily invested in open source and our code, but also our backlogs, our issues all live out in the open on GitHub. And so from there, it's a very simple step to connect that to Grafana and visualize it. But the other reasons will be relevant to everybody. If you're able to use fewer tools, you can save a lot of complexity, save a lot of money. We also find that it means more of our staff, almost all of our staff, are able to operate side by side in Grafana, in that same tool, allowing for seamless collaboration, so we can collaborate across roles, across departments, and see the results of one another's work super easily. And then there's the strength of Grafana, the tool itself. It has that big tent of data sources. You can query data from two different places and see it side by side in the same dashboard, even blend it in the same panel. You can alert on absolutely anything. And it's fast, it's low latency. You can throw a fire hose of data at it, and it barely blinks, really. So we'd love to dive deeper into a couple of examples of our dashboards and pipelines we've built at Grafana Labs. And we really hope we can inspire you to consider whether you can apply Grafana in your business contexts when you get home. So.
Awesome. Yeah, so now let's jump into our demos here. The first thing is all these dashboards are going to be up on play.grafana.org or learn.grafana.net. We'll have a QR code at the end if you want to check that out. The first example is a dashboard that we actually created for our product teams, namely our product design and engineering folks. And the idea here was that we really wanted to help visualize and understand the Kubernetes monitoring adoption funnel. And we've essentially established these dashboards for a number of different critical user journeys throughout our product. This one in particular is looking at 4 key stages across awareness, activation, engagement, and our aha moment. And so what we were able to do with this is essentially put the power in the hands of our end users to inspect how our funnels are doing on a daily basis, look at the aggregate flows in the typical kind of funnel fashion, finding some of the drop-off rates or pull-through rates for each step, as well as our key KPIs around adoption percentage, time to set up, as well as time to value. And the cool thing that we can start doing is adding on annotations on top. Because one of the things that we typically want to do is have this baseline understanding of our business, but then start to see how that changes as the overall user experience begins to change. So as we launch different A/B tests, we can essentially have these annotations come up and be based on the underlying data. So what's awesome here is that this is based on the BigQuery data. We actually don't have to have an analyst go in and annotate manually each of these different events. And so you can see you probably could have figured out what was going on here without the annotation, but it's super helpful to see that we launched this A/B test to 30% of our population down here. And then you can also identify that as we launch this, there are now 2 different experiences out there in the wild, which is causing this distribution to increase. And then as we end the test and roll it out to 100% of our population, that goes back to kind of our longer-term average. The other thing that we do quite often in most of our dashboards is start to build in interactivity. So for this case, we're looking at different monthly cohorts, and we allow our users to essentially slice and dice this data, leveraging data links as well as the dashboard variables to get it and start inspecting and get their hands on the underlying data. So the next set of panels that we're looking at here is one around our A/B testing measurement. And this is something that we've seen really be impactful for our growth and onboarding teams. And you can imagine this is essentially something that we built for all of our A/B tests going back for the last 2.5 years, where we can combine the underlying data that we have in BigQuery with metadata about what we're testing, what we've seen be successful versus not. And that's been really helpful for us, not only as humans looking at this data and looking at that ledger of past history, but it's also been really helpful for us bringing this context to our agents and LLMs. And so what I was very curious to see was whether or not we would be able to have the assistant go in and essentially conduct an A/B testing measurement for our test. This is typically something you'd have to go and, as a PM, kind of ask your analyst or maybe put into a specialized tool to run A/B testing. But what we're able to do here is, because we have all of the context in this dashboard, pass the dashboard to our assistant and ask generally, can you please go and test for statistical significance? And what's pretty sweet is that because we have the panels and because we can reference the dashboard, the assistant more or less can not have to start from scratch. It goes in and starts to read the underlying panels. You can parse through all the JSON here. And as it's working, it'll eventually, fingers crossed, come up with a understanding of the underlying test data that we have, this engagement test that launched from March 1st to March 31st. And then ultimately it decides the correct kind of 2 proportion z-test for us to go ahead and do that A/B testing and builds that into the BigQuery data. And so what's sweet here is that more or less it was able to do all the statistical calculations in BigQuery for us and ultimately come up with this pretty nice summary for our tests. It turns out the synthetic data that I created wasn't actually that fair of an A/B test. This was very, very significant in terms of the success of the test. The last thing I'll mention here is that we at Grafana Labs use the assistant quite often in our day-to-day work. And the inflection point that happened for us was when we added the assistant into our Slack channels. I think we, like most remote companies, do a lot of our work in Slack. And so by having the ability to have the assistant come in, not only have access to the underlying data, the dashboards that we just saw, but also be able to look through the threads of conversations that we've been having, has just been a really great way to build in the assistant, again, into our daily flows. So if you are interested in doing something like this for yourself, I'd highly recommend coming in to the assistant settings and into the SQL table discovery tab, and essentially turning this sync on for both your underlying kind of BigQuery or wherever you're storing your data, as well as into your semantic layer. Essentially what that'll do is take all the metadata from those from your backend databases, put that into a vector database, and allow the assistant to do a much more efficient query over that metadata when looking for the right table or right column to end up using.
Great. So I'm going to show another example of how we're using Grafana as our BI tool. This, similar to the dashboards you've just seen, uses synthetic data. So you can see customer names like Crest Commerce, Lunar Links. And it's a smaller data set than we use internally, 300 accounts, because this is on playgrafana.com. It's on the demo environment, so you can all explore this later. But apart from that, this dashboard is exactly as we use it internally. The schema is the same, the panel is the same, so you can see exactly how we're running our business. This dashboard is for our sellers, salespeople, and our SDRs in go-to-market. They do a fantastic job. We're very proud of them. They make sure we're getting paid. And we realized pretty early that we could keep them doing even better work by giving them the best tools and the best data. And so our revenue operations team built this dashboard for them. And our internal version is loading hundreds of thousands of records from our Salesforce data, all of our prospects, all of our contacts, and each of those rows itself has over 100 columns. So there's a lot of data being loaded in here. But it's all aggregated up to this high-level view of the entire sales pipeline for Grafana Labs. So we get this top overview, and then we start to break it down by the account size, how far through the sales funnel they are, how much activity they're showing on a couple of different axes, and even how close to hitting our targets we are for this quarter. And more importantly, this has got over 15 different dimensions at the top here where this data can be sliced and diced, and different people can get in and slice it as they need. So our execs who own large teams or smaller teams can focus in on their region or their sub-region, and then they can see if their teams and their region is on track and lean in and help where necessary. That's at the top of the organization. And then the people at the cutting face, our sellers, our SDRs, are able to use the very same dashboard. They can slice and dice by some of these signals, and they can filter down to just the few accounts that are relevant to them and that they'll pursue that day or that week. And this has been fantastic. This has been working. It's been super powerful, and we're proud of it. In the process of building this, we realized there were further opportunities to improve the UX even further. So I started to implement support for this semantic layer. So what is it? Well, it sits in front of the warehouse and connects to Grafana. And it allows for 3 really significant improvements, actually, with how we are able to interact with our data through Grafana. So the first is that it allows you to click data within panels to filter and drill through dashboards. I'll show you that. The second is, once it's set up, you don't have to write SQL. You don't have to know SQL, and you don't have to know your data model either. And so I'll show you that in practice. And the third way is it really elevates what AI agents and the Grafana Assistant can do with the data in your warehouse. So let's have a look at how that works in practice. So this version is just built from a SQL data source directly. So our sellers wanted to be able to click these data and filter the dashboard directly. But if you tried to inject something like where behavior signal equals high into like a SQL query that's this SQL query, they might have CTEs, they might have subqueries. You're inevitably going to hit a wall where you break the SQL query eventually. So we couldn't make these interactive. And so that was the first one. That was the first one about filtering from the panel. The second one, not needing to learn SQL. In the SQL world, this is built from a SQL query which is almost 30 lines long. You have to know the table, you have to know what other tables to join and how to join them, and you also have to manually reference all of these filters as well. So this takes a bit of time to build a panel like this, and also a bit of effort to maintain. Okay, so that was the status quo. Let's have a look at what it looks like when we rebuild this exact same dashboard, but we build it on top of a semantic layer. Specifically, this is a data source which wraps up a semantic layer. So let's try filtering. All of a sudden, you can click and click again. And not only do you filter this panel, but you filter the entire dashboard. And so we've now been able to drill down to the accounts that have this high behavior signal. They're the ones that are showing engagement. And we can drill even further. Now we want to drill again into the ones that have a high activity pulse. And suddenly, we've drilled twice, and we've filtered this dashboard down so quickly and intuitively. And we've got those 4 accounts that we're going to engage with this week. So that's super powerful. That was the first benefit. So the second benefit, not needing to learn SQL. Let's have a look at how this panel was built when you use a semantic layer. I've only had to make 1, 2, 3, 4 selections, and I'm able to get the exact same data to render in the panel. How does that work? How is that possible? Well, the semantic layer is generating the SQL needed. So two things to see here. First, only having to make 4 selections, it's much quicker to build that panel, and it's much, much easier to maintain as well. So we can go a lot faster when we're building these dashboards. But also, not having to write SQL anymore vastly lowers the barrier to entry, right? So people right across our business now are able to issue queries and get insights from the data in our warehouse. They don't need to learn SQL, and they don't need to learn the data model. This is huge. Let me just show you one more thing here with the semantic layer. If I come down here, I can also filter from tables. So here I'm choosing to filter to stage qualification. And you see the filter lands up here, op stage equals qualification. And if I edit this panel, you can see the SQL generated is generated from these selections made to define the panel. Also from the filter up here, op stage equals qualification. So here it has injected a where clause. Stage name equals question mark, that question mark will be populated as qualification. So how is this working? How does this overcome the problem I described earlier? This depends on having access to the table with this suffix op split. Well, in order to make sure that this SQL will run, it's made an extra join, and it's joined in the table we need, op split here. So if you watch carefully, if I was to clear out this filter, not only will we lose the where clause, but we'll lose the join as well, as the semantic layer is generating this SQL dynamically for us. So there you go. It's able to inject the joins it needs and traverse that graph of tables to apply any filters it needs to. So that's the second of the 2 benefits. But you might be thinking, why do we need a technology to generate SQL for us today? We've got the generative AIs, right? The LLMs. They're going to generate all the SQL we need today. Well, unfortunately, they do hallucinate, and when they do, they're incredibly confident about it. And they may forget to, they may not know all of the wrinkles of our data model or the wrinkles of our data. Let me show you where this is defined. The semantic layer kind of consists of this configuration in YAML files, which is metadata around your tables and your columns. So it consists of things like descriptions and titles, and also how to make aggregations. So is a measure a count, or is it a sum, for example? But crucially, this forms the source of truth for your business metrics. So here we've got one named total ARR. Different companies define ARR in different ways. And what you don't want is your LLM, your agent, to be making an assumption about how you define ARR within your company. And some of these are not straightforward either. This one, you can see inlines some logic as well. So we definitely want this single source of truth to be consumed across all of our panels, all of our dashboards. And if it ever gets updated, for all of those dashboards to still show the correct data. And we definitely want our agents to consume from that single source of truth as well. So let's go and have a look at what happens when we send a query to the Grafana Assistant. So here I'm asking, how many customers are there in EMEA? And so you can see from this blue icon, it's querying the BigQuery SQL data source to get us an answer. It's made 4 queries here, and you can see the first one's actually failed. It has got us an answer, so that's pretty great. Now if I ask it to repeat using the Cube tool, Cube is the technology we're using, wrapped up in that data source to power our semantic layer. And you can see it's only made 1, 2 queries. So it's getting us an answer faster, more cheaply, it's burning less tokens, and it's using that single source of truth. And you can see that coming out here. It's giving us the same answer, but with more granularity. So suddenly we're leveling up our agents. And this doesn't look super, super significant, this example, but it's the times when the agent gets something wrong with confidence that really bite, where this will really help you. So we've done this by building a data source that wraps Cube. Cube is an open source, free and open source project. Like Grafana, you can download it and self-host it today. And then you can install the data source as well, is free and open source. The repo's on GitHub here. We would love for you to give this a try in your own self-hosted Grafana or in your cloud Grafana. I'd love to hear what you think. So if we return to the slides. So Chris and I will be at Ask the Experts tomorrow at 3:15. Please do come and find us. And the demos that we showed today are all available on the demo booths. They're available at play.grafana.com, which is at the first QR code. And we'd love to field any questions you have. Thank you.